What is up? It's me, Roku, back with another League video, and this time we're going to make an advanced guide on laning and trading. At first you might think that laning is like a super simple concept. You go to lane, you hit the enemy, you hit the minions a little bit, and that's it. But this cannot be further from the truth. Laning has a lot of parts that require a lot of work in terms of instilling great habits, but also some aspects that require you to actively think and pay attention. Like if you're not paying attention, somebody who is will destroy you. So if you pay attention to this video, you'll be a solid laner by the end of it. Before we get into some of the more advanced tips, I want to make sure we start off with some of the more simpler, rudimentary things so that even the beginners can come along with us with the video. Like, the advice gets more complicated as the video goes on. So yeah, let's just get right into it. The first tip is to remind yourself what to watch out for versus the enemy champion. The most important thing in your lane is your opponent, their champion, right? Like, can you beat that champion? Can you win trades against them? Are you better in all-ins or short fights against them? Is this a champion that you can actually even kill? Think of all the possible outcomes and also remind yourself what to watch out for. I know we already do this subconsciously, but a lot of the times it's not really done properly. I watch my coaching students and they die in a weird way to a Teemo, and I'm like, hey, why did you die like that? You know, like that you can't all attack in his blinds, and like I just don't get a solid answer because a lot of the time, even though we know something, we haven't reminded ourselves of it. How many times have you died to things that you already know in game? This is because instead of thinking about that before the game, you just went straight into the match, right? So before the match loads, just look at the enemy champions and think, okay, this champion has a stun that I should avoid. This champion's disability is on that cooldown. Just remind yourself these basic things so you can actually keep up with your own level of knowledge. I know it sounds tedious in the beginning, but once you do it enough, it will eventually just be memorized and you'll do it automatically. For those of you who need more advice on matchups, I have a sick matchup tier list for Darius, so go check it out. TLDR, know your champion and know the matchup. Tip number 2. Have a plan before the game starts. We want to basically make sure that we know exactly what we want out of laning phase before the laning phase even starts, okay? Before you even walk to lane and see your enemy champion. Do you want to play aggressively and get fed? Do you want to play passively and survive? What do you want and need from the lane? This is a very, very important point because this changes based on the game, okay? You can't just play like a champion that's strong early and be like, okay, every game I want to get kills, because some games that's just not possible. You can play set and be like, okay, I want to win fights in lane, but if you get counterpicked by like a Volibear or something, then you don't want to fight. You want to just basically play safe and only fight when the jungler is there or something. You have to think about this before every single match so you can play optimally in that match. This not only helps you when it comes to how you fight your enemy laner, but it also helps you with another big aspect of top lane, wave control. Tip number 3, focus on the minions. Low elo top lane is champions interacting with each other. High elo top lane is champions interacting with each other's minions. You should try your best to be aware of the roles that the minions play in fights. And I don't just mean in terms of where the minions have crashed, but also literally how much they impact the fight in terms of the damage they do. Because if you fight inside the enemy minions, you're gonna take like a solid 100-200 damage from just the minions. We also all know that the distance between the enemy and their turret can sometimes make a kill a lot easier to get in that. If you're a Darius with Ghost running someone down, if you have the wave closer to your turret, then because they have a long distance to run to safety, you can more comfortably kill them with your Ghost. A big part of top lane is wave control because it can help you easily just stack the odds in your favor against an unfavorable matchup, or better yet, single-handedly win you the lane through a killer permafreeze. Wave control is another tool that helps you work towards your goals that we've already decided in the previous hints. You manipulate the minions and put it in a position that is advantageous to what you want to do. Do you want to play safe? Freeze it outside your turret. Do you want to destroy someone and kill them with their turret? Slow push a big minion wave and destroy them with the minions. Since this is a laning guide, I'm not going to go too much into depth as to what wave control is, because I've already made a great video on this topic. Go check it out, I'm going to link it on the screen. Tip number 4, expect the best from your opponent until they show otherwise. I get a lot of people who make mistakes and they compromise on the perfect plays or builds because they always tell themselves that the person they're playing against is like a noob. Like, hey, you know, I would build the right thing, but because this is lowy low, I'm just gonna build the damage, okay? Like, this is not a good thing to do. You never want to underestimate your opponent, because if they turn out to be a solid player, then you will get absolutely destroyed, okay? The best way to play is to try to play your best against somebody and expect the best from them until they show you that they aren't good enough. Let's say you're laning against Jace top, right? A Jace is supposed to be super aggressive early and not let you even farm, right? He's just gonna bully you with his ranged attacks, his abilities, and stop you from even getting the XP. So earlier on, just stand in a safe position where you're not in range of his attacks. But when the Jace player shows that he's not that aggressive, he doesn't know how much power his champion possesses, then you walk up, then you CS, and bit by bit, you test what this guy knows and what he doesn't know, so that you can, out of a sudden, go for an all-in and just instantly kill them. You never want to underestimate your opponent from the beginning. You should always overestimate them, because in case they are better than you, you're actually prepared to actually fight them and not just go for the lazy thing and get destroyed. Alright, so those are all the simple things and the basic tips. Let's get into the more complicated stuff. Tip number 5. Actively look for trading openings. Openings are a simple concept. It is when the enemy has made a mistake that has allowed them to be in a vulnerable position that lets you take advantage. There are lots of types of openings in the game, and it all depends on how perceptive you are in terms of detecting them. The enemy can mispush a minion wave into a position that you can permanently freeze, winning you the lane. The enemy can waste an important ability like a set W or a Fiora riposte that you can take advantage of in a trade or even an all-in for a kill. The enemy can even be standing in the wrong place on the lane, which lets you run them down or something, because let's say they're up against the wall, they can't easily dodge your skill shots, okay? There are lots of opportunities for openings, and the reason we need to look for them is that if we constantly try to force things, right, we just walk towards the enemy, toss our abilities, we're giving them openings to expose and destroy. Top lane is a game of patience, okay? And the person who's patient enough to wait for the other to mess up is the person who's going to get the first kill and be the most powerful champion on the map. Don't walk towards the enemy and force things. Wait for them to get impatient and force things, and then you take advantage of it and win the lane. The default state when it comes to your existence in top lane should be farming, killing minions. Let's say that the enemy walks up to a minion and tries to kill it, right? They last hit it. They've just used an auto attack or an ability to kill this minion. This is an opening because they've just wasted something on a different target. You can go for an auto attack on them or an ability to do some damage, or hey, if they are in range while killing the minion wave, you can even go for an all-in. The reason we pay so much attention to CS is that when a champion approaches a creep that is about to die, they are intending on last hitting it. This is very obvious to anybody who has played the game for more than 2 minutes. The opening here comes in that the champion trying to CS is not only putting themselves in an obvious position where they can tank abilities, but they're also wasting an auto attack or an ability, so if the enemy starts a fight against them, they're down one auto attack. These are the sorts of tiny openings you have to constantly take advantage of if you really want to win lane against more skilled opponents. Try to go for trades and all-ins when a crucial ability is wasted. You'll notice that every single champion in top lane has some ability that they're defenseless without, okay? Set W, Mordekaiser W, Fiora riposte, like all these champions have some ability that makes it so that once it's gone, they're a sitting duck and easy to kill. Once these abilities are down, then you go for aggressive trades and look for all-ins because it's basically a free kill, isn't it? We can either play passively and wait for the enemy to make the mistake that we're looking for, or try to bait it out. And by bait it out, I don't mean just running towards the enemy brainlessly, but more so knowing how the enemy wants to use that ability and using the tools at your disposal to avoid it. Let's imagine a circumstance of baiting against Illaoi, for example. Illaoi is nothing without her E in fights. Therefore, it is a great idea to bait her E out before even going for an all-in. Illaoi's E cannot go through enemy minions, so you have to basically step outside your minion wave to bait it. Let's say we do so, and we're walking towards an enemy minion that is about to die. So, when Illaoi sees this, she not only sees that we're in range to be hit by E, but she also sees that we're going for an almost dying minion. So in her mind, we're going for our last hit and she's gonna land a nice easy E. But we know that she knows this, and we're just baiting it. So once she goes for her E, we step back into our minion wave and dodge the E with a dash, movement, whatever. We did just lose a CS, but she also no longer has her E, which means that we can just go in on her and kill her quite easily. Speaking of which, it's okay to give up CS. Farming is one of the most basic yet important things in the game. Every minion is in itself an objective, and whoever gets the most of these objectives is usually the winner in the overall, top lane. When you kill your opponent, you don't just get 300 gold and kill XP, you also receive gold and XP from the minion wave, while your opponent gets nothing because they're dead. This basically further exacerbates your lead, and is why some champions can just snowball out of control. It is always a good idea to train your CSing ability and focus on last hitting as well as possible in the game. However, a lot of players, especially newer players, do this to a fault. But Rhoku, high CS is good. How can farming ever be a bad thing? The basic idea is that if you're in a position where you will lose HP by taking CS, you should not take it. This is especially important when one plays into ranged matchups or just bad matchups in general who constantly win trades against you. You should have an idea of what the area of influence of all champions are, and you can tell this by playing against the champions in lane or trying them out in practice tool. If you're new and you haven't bought all the champions yet, I recommend making an account on the PBE because you get all the champions for free there. You can hop on PBE and check out whatever champion you want, whatever ability you want, and then come back on your main to play the game, being stronger with the new knowledge that you're equipped with. Just be aware that Riot sometimes buffs and nerfs certain things, so you want to keep an eye on what's changed while you're testing things on the PBE. You can also use CS tactically. As I mentioned in the previous tip, you can use CS in a lot of ways to bait your enemies. If your enemy is going for a creep, you can toss an ability to land some crucial poke. You can pretend to CS and bait an ability like we discussed. You can stop CSing to fool your enemy into thinking you're out of lane and then walk back in to kill them from a bush or something. Yada yada yada. There's a lot of ways to use CS to your advantage to beat your enemy. I'm not saying that farming is not important, but what I am saying is that you shouldn't tunnel vision on just CSing. You should keep an eye out for your opposing top laners and the other things going on around the map. Everyone should be good at CSing. Not because we want the pretty number to go up, but because we want to be in a position where we can kill every single minion that's being given to us. To better understand this point, let's consider Darius and two matchups, Garen and Vayne. Against Garen, the Darius should have access to every single minion. Against Vayne, however, Darius will not have access to a lot of the minions. In fact, if the Vayne player is aggressive enough, Darius won't have access to most of his minions, but let's just say that for the sake of thinking, Darius has access to half of his minions. Now, if the Darius can farm perfectly, he gets 10 CS per minute against Garen, which is godlike, and 5 CS per minute versus Vayne, which, keep in mind, is pretty good given that he's in a horrible lane. And let's imagine that the Darius sucks at CSing, and he himself has the ability to take only half of the CS that's being given to him. Against Garen, he gets 5 or 6 CS per minute, which isn't horrible, but it's just not good enough. But against the Vayne, he gets like 2 to 3 CS per minute. This is embarrassing. These are bronze tier numbers. You should always try to be as good at farming as possible, okay? But don't tunnel vision on the CS. Sometimes you can't get CS without losing your HP. Sometimes you can use CS aggressively. Sometimes you can bait your enemy using CS. Try to be aware of all these things and understand that sometimes giving up CS for a greater goal is a possibility and even a better option than just going for that CS. Tip number 7, outside influence. This is likely the least favorite topic of all top laners, outside influence. Now we all know that I mean junglers, but let's be real, everyone on the map except for ADCs can roam top, mid, support, jungle, your grandma, everyone. Outside influence changes everything for top lane, so you want to adjust your playstyle to better handle it. Even if the matchup you're playing against is super easy, and the enemy is just some complete idiot who deserves to lose the lane, none of that matters when the enemy jungler is here. in a 2v1 situation, you are destined to die. So instead of dying, give up your CS, give up the turret, give up that easy kill in the laner, whatever, okay? When the enemy puts more pressure on you, you cannot play aggressively unless you have backup, okay? We as League players are mentally conditioned to play every single situation with the goal of looking for a net positive, a win, so to speak. But when you're getting camped, there is no win. The choice is often between a loss and a greater loss. Let's say that you took a horrible trade and are now half HP. Even though you can survive and farm easily under turret, if the enemy jungler comes in to dive you, then you're basically just gonna die under turret. Now you have a choice. You either stay, or you try to recall and escape. If you stay, you give the enemy a kill, turret plates, and lose CS. If you escape, you give the enemy turret plates and lose CS. See? There's no win in this situation. It's only a loss and an even bigger loss. So you have to basically consciously make the choice to give things up and go for the lesser loss. But Rhoku, how do I know someone's roaming? It really depends on the game and the match itself, but generally speaking, you guess where the enemy is based on previous knowledge of what those champions are capable of, what happened previously in the game, and obviously vision. You should always pay attention to the map. Let's say that the enemy mid laner is a Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate just shoved a massive wave into your mid laner's turret, and then he's off of vision. He's gone from the map. Now, I hope I don't have to say this, but he is looking for a fat gank with his ultimate. At this point, it is basically a horrible idea to be aggressive because you're really leaving yourself wide open to being ganked and killed by the Twisted Fate. Some champions can roam more than others, and if the enemy has one of these champions, you should be careful, right? If the enemy has like an Alistar or a Bard or a Pyke in their support role, or roaming mid laners like a Kiana, a Talon, a Twisted Fate, a Katarina, like just keep an eye out if the enemy has roaming champions and try to expect them to roam when they're off the map. When it comes to junglers though, things get a little bit more complicated. The thing about the jungler role is that they are the most powerful early game, and how they play their early game impacts the rest of their match. Theoretically, a jungler can be wherever they want until you see them on the map or get vision of their jungle camps to see where they've cleared so far. To guess where the enemy jungler is with accuracy, you have to constantly look at the map and gather hints and tips to kind of form an educated guess. Did the enemy bot lane leash the jungler? Do we have a deep ward that tells us where the enemy jungler is? Did the enemy jungler already gank and reveal their position? Look at the map and find the answers to these questions. If the enemy top laner is in lane from the start and the enemy bot lane leashed, that means that the enemy jungler is pathing top. This means that by the third or the fourth wave, depending on how fast the jungler clears, you're gonna get ganked. Knowing this, you can choose to let your enemy push the wave in so that you can safely farm on the turret, or shove the third or fourth wave in quickly and go for a cheat or recall before you can get ganked. Think about jungle presence in terms of map sides, okay? They're either top side or they're bot side. If a jungler is on your side of the map, then you are a potential target for a gank. And until you learn where they exactly are, or until you personally learn more about what that champion is capable of, you want to play safely when the jungler is on your side of the map. It is far better to play in a way where they can gank you at any time, or at least play in a way where you can escape if they gank you, because if you play riskily and aggressively, like, oh, I'm going to 2v1, then you are 100% going to get ganked and murdered. Anyway guys, that's pretty much it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.